everyone. Oh, what have I got here? Well, I'm getting ready for the Zoom baking. And I expect you will have already done your Zoom baking by now when you're watching this, and I hope it went well. We've got a story all about Abigail, another character from the Old Testament. You'll find this story in the book of Samuel, which is about a quarter of the way through the Bible from the start. You may recognise the voice of the person telling us the story. It's one of the older children. It's Bonheur.
Here is a story from Old Testament times about a lady called Abigail. You can find the story in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 25. Abigail was humble and wise and was also very beautiful. Abigail listened to God. Nabal was Abigail's husband. He was a very rich man who owned 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. Nabal was a mean, bad-tempered man. David was the king of Israel who wrote the book of 150 Psalms. The story takes place just after he defeated Goliath, when he is camped in the wilderness with his men.
It is sheep shearing time for Nabal. David had been kind and protective Nabal's shepherds. David sent 10 young men to Nabal to ask for provision as a favor. Nabal says, "No, I don't trust David's men." When the men return to David and tell him he's very angry and decides to take revenge on Nabal, David says, "Buckle on your sword," and he sets out with 400 of his men, leaving 200 behind with supplies. One of Nabal's servants tells Abigail that David and his men are coming to attack them. "What shall we do?" he says. Abigail collects 200 loaves of bread, 5 roasted sheep, 200 cakes of dried figs, grained, and wine. She had them loaded onto donkeys and tell her servants to go ahead and that she will follow them. David was leading his men in a real rage against Nabal. He swears he will kill all Nabal's household. Suddenly, Abigail comes from around the bend on a hillside riding her donkey. Abigail gets down and throws herself on the ground before David. She asks him to forgive Nabal's foolishness and to blame her. She says, "Please, sir, accept the gifts I have brought you and don't attack us in revenge." Abigail reminds David of his calling from God to be king of Israel and not waste his time with them, as God will deal with his enemies. David hears her words and says, "Praise God for sending you. Thank you for your good sense. You have stopped me from committing a very bad crime. Go back home and don't worry." Not long after, Nabal dies and David sends a proposal of marriage to Abigail, who accepts.
Here's Bonheur, who read the story for us. Thanks very much, Bonheur. Now we're going to have a quiz on the story you've just heard. Have a listen as I read out the questions and shout out the answers. How many characters in the story today? Was it 1 person, 2 people, or 3? The answer is 3. Can you name them? Look at the letters. That will give you a clue. There was Abigail, Nabal, and David. How many goats did Nabal own? Was it 1,000, 3,000, or 10,000? And the answer is 3,000. If you got all those answers right, you'll have got yourself a total of 5. For this page, you can score 3 points. How many men does David send to ask Nabal for a favour? It was 10. Which animals carry the provisions? Was it elephants, camels, or donkeys? It was donkeys. How many roasted sheep does Abigail take to David's men? Well, it was 5. And if you got all those questions right, You scored yourself another 3 points. For another point, as well as the roasted sheep, can you name one other food item from the story? Well, you could have said loaves of bread or dried fig cakes. And if you did, give yourself another point. Last question. What does David say that Abigail has stopped him from doing? A marathon race, a bad crime, or giving a birthday present? Well, David said that Abigail stopped him from committing a bad crime. And that's it. So if you got all those questions right, you could have a score of 10. In the story, David gets really angry and wants to take revenge and attack Nabal. Do you feel like that sometimes? Maybe when you're angry, that makes you shout at people or even do harm to them, like this boy here. David was sorry and forgot about his anger when he remembered what God had called him to become. Abigail acted as a peacemaker, didn't she? She reminded David that God had called him to become a king and not to be a bully. Why don't you choose to follow God's plans for your life and be a peacemaker like Abigail? At the end of our video today, we are going to see a replay of the balloon game that we did with Paddy, Eddie, Naomi and Michael last summer. So in case you don't know, they have moved away from our area now. And so we'd like to wish their mum and them all the very best and come back and see us again when you can. This is a game you can play at home if you've got a balloon. The person who doesn't have the balloon has to try and pop the balloon. You've got to let him pop it, Naomi. I know where well done.
Go on, nearly. Yay! Well done. Come on, Paddy. Come on, Paddy, bring in the big artillery. Oh.
I don't know what I'm doing myself. You never know what I'm running. Oh my God, no, go away, Paddy. Go away, Paddy.